All right. Well, welcome everyone to today's Qdabra webinar. And today we will be going over the Formotus Creator software. And this is a relatively new feature. I think it's been around for a little less than a year. A relatively new feature from Formotus, which specializes in creating and deploying mobile forms. This is a new feature that allows you to actually create mobile forms directly through the Formotus interface instead of having to design them in InfoPath and then deploying them through Formotus. Now, before we get started, I've got a quick poll that I would like to launch to get an idea of how familiar you all are with Formotus itself. So let me go ahead and launch that there. You should see a pop-up window with a poll, and go ahead and choose whichever answer most closely matches your experience or background with Formotus. And all right, thank you very much. Looks like everyone's voted. So some of you have never heard of Formotus until recently. It looks about half of you have heard of Formotus but never used it. All right, so this will be a great introduction for those of you who've logged on to the webinar today. Thank you for answering that. I do want to let you know that we do have a formal multi-day Formotus training class coming up in March, the 13th through 16th. It's a 4-day class, and we will be going over how to create a form in Formotus Creator in great detail, going over all the different features there. That class is $6.95, and you will get all of the content of the class as well as video recordings of any demos that are done during the class. And there's more info on that on the Qdabra website, and I've got a link to that at the end of today's slides as well. So I just wanted to throw that out there. What we're going to be doing today is going to be a very quick demo that will give you an idea of what you can do with Formotus Creator. And I will try to dip into the questions every now and then if you have questions. But just to let you know, this is going to be slightly longer than your average webinar. Usually they're about 20-25 minutes. This is going to take a little longer just because we're going to be building a Formotus Creator form template from scratch. So what is Formotus Creator? Well, this is essentially Formotus's answer to InfoPath Designer, so that you can build your own mobile forms from within the Formotus platform without having to also purchase and familiarize yourself with InfoPath Designer. Now, many of you have probably used InfoPath before, so you're already familiar with that. And if you are, then familiarizing yourself with Formotus Creator is going to be even easier. You can design very clean, very simple layouts backed by many of the same complex logic and rules functionality that you can get through InfoPath Designer. You've got all of the basic form controls that you're used to: text boxes, check boxes, radio buttons, drop downs, date pickers, in addition to Formotus custom controls that are built specifically for the mobile environment, like a camera control that allows you to take pictures or upload pictures that are already saved on your mobile device, with or without annotation, which allows you to draw on the pictures if you wanted to, say, circle a certain part of a picture to draw attention to it. The signature control that allows you to actually add a handwritten signature to your form. They also have a barcode scanner, a GPS location, and there are a couple other custom controls as well. You can query data from SharePoint, from Excel if you'd like to upload an Excel spreadsheet. You can also query data, this is relatively new, from Google Sheets as well if you want to save your data onto Google Drive. And you can also use various SOAP web services if you're a more advanced developer. You can submit your data to SharePoint. You can submit data to Google Sheets on Google Drive. You can also submit via email with PDF attachment. That's a built-in feature to Formotus Creator. It supports many of the calculations that you're used to. You've got actions. You can also have formatting rules with conditions. We'll take a look at one of those today. And there's also an added feature, Formotus workflows. Now, if you've ever used SharePoint workflows, this is very similar to a SharePoint assignment workflow. You can assign submitted forms to other users for review or completion. So, for example, if you have a form that needs to be reviewed by a manager and either approved or rejected, that's one application that you could have for these Formotus workflows. We won't be looking at that today, but you will get to examine Formotus workflows if you sign up for the training class that we're offering in March. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a quick look at the Formotus Creator layout before I switch over to Formotus and actually start building that sample form template that I've promised you. This is the basic layout of Formotus Creator. In the middle here is the view pane. This is similar to the design pane in InfoPath Designer. This is where you actually get to see all of the different controls that you are throwing onto your form as you're designing it. And this will scroll up and down so you can see the extent of the form. Over here on the left is where you actually add all the different controls. Right now in this screenshot, you only see some of the basic controls. This scrolls down and you can see some of the more advanced controls, as well as the ability to add repeating section controls. Over here on the right, right now you're seeing the data pane. This is where you would add either a submit connection or a query for data connection as well. If I were to click right here on fields, that would bring up a section that's very similar to the fields or the schema pane in InfoPath Designer. Very important button up here on the top left is this green Save and Publish button. You'll want to click that fairly often because Formotus Creator is a browser-based form creation platform. So it's not a standalone thing like InfoPath Designer. You're actually doing this in the browser. So Save and Publish is how you would save your work. Let me see, I think I have more information on the next slide. There we go. The preview form button actually doesn't do what you think it does. It doesn't preview the form. In order to preview the form, you actually have to save and publish the app. Save and publish your form, and then on a mobile device, actually open up the form and use it. Now, this can get a little tricky if you have a form that's currently deployed, and deployed is the Formotus term for actually pushing the form to your users so that they can open it up and use it on their mobile devices. So if you have a form that's already deployed and you want to make some changes to it and maybe test those changes, debug them, make sure it works, before you push that updated version to your users, you can't really do that in Formotus Creator. So you have to do a bit of a workaround. What you would want to do in that case is click Save As button here, and then simply rename this template to create a copy of it. So the form I'm working on here was Webinar Demo 01. I could do a Save As and create Webinar Demo Test, right? And then I would go open up that Webinar Demo Test, which would be a carbon copy of my currently active deployed form, Webinar Demo 01. And I can make all my changes to that. I could save and publish that, deploy it only to myself, open it up on my iPhone or my iPad, test it, debug it, do everything on that test version. Then when I'm done testing that and all the bugs are gone, I would open up that test. I would click Save As for that test template that I've been working on, enter in the name of the original form, and that would overwrite this original form with the test version that I've already updated and debugged. So just to keep that in the back of your mind, if you do end up using Formotus Creator to create your own templates, that's how you would make updates to a currently deployed active form without having to deploy the potentially buggy version of your updates to your active user base. Okay, that is enough talk for now. We are going to go explore the Formotus Creator design environment, and we are actually going to build a simple expense report on today's webinar. We're going to query an uploaded Excel spreadsheet that I've already created, and we're going to include a repeating section to capture individual expenses. And we're also going to include a data connection to submit to SharePoint, and also one to email a PDF version of the form, which again is a nice built-in Formotus Creator feature. We're going to email a PDF version of the form to any user that we choose. And then I will open it up for questions and feedback at the end. All right, let's get out of PowerPoint and switch over to Formotus. So the website that you want to browse to is secure.formotus.com. I have that in the slides as well. And I'm going to sign in with our handy dandy training Qdabra account. And you can sign up for a free trial. You'll see there's a link down here to sign up for a free trial if you don't want to commit yourself and purchase a license just yet. So I'm going to sign in to the Formotus website. And when I sign in, I am automatically taken to the dashboard. And this dashboard is, like it says, a dashboard, and gives you an overview of your current Formotus account. I've got some recent forms here that I've been designing. Down here, it gives you an idea of how many submits there have been over recent months, and how many failures there have been if anyone has failed to submit. Down here you have user activity. As you can see, pretty much just myself under the training account. If you had many users using, you'd be able to see all of their individual logins, as well as which forms they had used recently, what actions they took, and what version of the form they used, when they'd used it. So there's a lot of information on your users down here, as well as some information on the license that you have. And any notifications. We aren't going to be using any of these dashboard features. For today, we're going to go straight to the Forms tab up here. And this brings up a list of all of the forms that are currently designed here. Now, these are, it doesn't distinguish right now in this list on whether or not these are forms that have been designed in Formotus Creator or forms that have been designed in InfoPath Designer and uploaded to Formotus. So I'm going to go ahead and click New Form, because we are going to design a new form from scratch. Now you'll see here it gives you the option of uploading an InfoPath template. We're going to skip that for today, of course, and we're going to create a new form from scratch. Now you do have the option of creating one from scratch, which is what we're going to do. You also have the option of uploading an existing Formotus template, and I believe Formotus templates have the extension .fms. So that's one cool thing you can do, is actually download a template file, just like you could with an InfoPath Designer template file, which is a .xsn file. And so you could pass them around that way if you wanted to. Or they also have a nice gallery of pre-built templates that you could browse and use if you want. But no, we're going to do things the hard way. We are going to create a, oops, I clicked on the templates tab. I'm going to go back. We are going to create a Formotus Creator template from scratch. So I'm just going to call this Webinar Expense Report, and description and tags are optional. We'll leave them blank, and I'm going to click Create Form. And I'm going to let Formotus think about that a little bit as it's putting together our new form template. And here we are. This is what a blank template looks like in Formotus. And you'll see from the screenshots that I showed you a little while ago, oops, not sure why that popped open. This is the Formotus Creator interface. So you've got the controls over here on the left, the view pane, which has come with this sort of pre-populated title and logo control right here that you can customize. Over here you've got the data pane, where you can add either a submit connection or a query connection if I clicked on the query tab. And you also have the fields pane, which starts out completely blank, of course, because we have no fields whatsoever. So the first thing we're going to do, since it's given us this handy dandy title and logo control at the top, we might as well use that. We're going to go ahead and customize that. So I just clicked on this control, and you'll notice over here the controls pane has changed, and it has displayed the title and logo over here on the left. And so these are the properties for this particular control, which is called a title and logo control. So we're going to do a little bit of customization. And one nice thing about this control, in InfoPath, you would sort of have to build this from scratch by adding an image and adding a calculated value with that pre-populated text in it. Formotus Creator just kind of throws a control at you that has all that pre-built into it. So the first thing I'm going to do is change the logo, because I don't work for Acme Corporation. So down here you'll see there's a logo section. I'm going to click choose a file. And I do have over here a nice, let's see, I think it's under webinars. I do have a nice little image. There we go. This nice little Qdabra logo. I'm going to insert that instead. Let me go ahead and click open. Oh, I do have to select the image first. All right, and this is going to insert this image at full resolution, which is humongous. I don't want it to be that big. If someone's using this on an iPhone, that's going to take up the entire screen. So down here under image size, I'm going to change that to 100 by 100 pixels. And you'll see that won't update just yet because I haven't clicked the apply button at the top here. So it's very important to remember this apply button. Many of the changes you make in this properties pane over here on the left will not update in the view pane until you click apply. So I'm going to go ahead and click apply. And the other thing I want to do is customize the subtitle. I don't need my users to read, click this control to customize it. I'm going to say, please fill out and submit this report, because it's an expense report. And I'm going to click apply again. And there we go. So that has updated my title and logo control. And you'll notice this isn't tied to any fields because this doesn't do anything. It simply displays text and an image at the top. Okay, now that I've clicked apply, I'm going to click this arrow over here on the left to go back to my main controls pane. And now I'm going to start adding some actual interactive controls. And the first thing I want to do is add a text box at the top. So I'm going to simply click and drag the text box underneath my title and logo control. And that is going to add a nice text box control. And you'll notice in Formotus, just as you have the option in InfoPath Designer, this adds not just the text box, but also a nice label that can be used to give the text box a name. So now I'm going to click on that text box control, and over here on the left, you'll see the controls pane has given me the properties of that particular text box. So the first thing I'm going to do is change the label to something meaningful. We're going to call that full name. And in order for that to show up in the view pane, I'm going to click apply. And now you'll see label has changed to full name, much more meaningful. Now over here in the fields pane, you'll see that the field that is connected to that text box control has been given the default name of text box 1. And there are a lot of default names, and I highly suggest that you rename this by clicking that edit button, that tiny little edit button immediately underneath the default name. This brings up the field properties. And so I'm simply going to change this to full name. And just like in InfoPath, you can't have any spaces in your field names. So I'm going to make that just full name with no spaces there. As you see here, you have the ability to assign a default value to this particular field. You also have the ability to assign a default calculation to it by using the formula builder. And again, this is very similar to InfoPath Designer functionality. We're not going to do anything for this particular field. We will do something later to one of the other fields that we'll be adding. So I clicked Save there, and now I have a full name field in my new form template, and that is connected to the full name control that is on here. Now, a word of advice, you do have the ability to delete this full name field over here. This tiny little icon here is a trash can icon that gives you the ability to delete this field. If you delete this field, this control becomes unusable. You cannot bind this control to a different field in the future. So beware of that. If you say, oh, wait, I really don't want this control to be part of full name. I want it to belong to some other field over here. You can't just delete the field that it's currently bound to. So just throwing that out there. Okay, so we are done with this first text box that we've added. And now I'm going to add a couple of other fields on here. It's an expense report, so it might be a good idea to have a date so that the expense report will be dated. We know what date that it was submitted. So you saw me just drag this date control over here to the view pane, and I now have a handy dandy date control. I'm going to click on it to bring up its properties. I'm going to rename it to something meaningful, date, and then I'm going to click apply. And over here, you'll see I have a default named date 1 field. I'm going to click this tiny little edit button underneath that default name to bring up the field properties. And I'm going to just call that date. And down here, you'll see that Formotus Creator has decided to be helpful, and it has given me a default formula that is set to the today function. And I'm going to leave that in here because it is nice to have the date field auto-populate to today's date. When someone opens up the form, of course, they can always overwrite that and pick another date, but this is just one less thing that the user has to remember to do. So I'm going to leave that in here and click Save. And just because I'm a little paranoid about my internet connection, I'm going to click Save and Publish right now, and that will save my progress here. And I notice we have a question over here. Let me open up the questions pane. Do you know if this supports migration of particularly complex InfoPath forms, supports all Q rules, etc.? Matt, no, Formotus does not currently support Q rules. It does, however, support native InfoPath functionality. So anything you can do with InfoPath Designer, with a couple of caveats. If you try to throw in some extremely complex logic, a lot of extremely complex rules, sometimes that won't work. However, here, let me type an answer in here. Just out of the box, InfoPath Designer features. So let me pop this back in. However, one thing I have found very, very helpful is Formotus Help Center. So this is support.formotus.com. And again, this link is in the slide deck that you'll be getting at the end of the webinar. You can always submit a request. They're usually pretty responsive within 24 to 48 hours. And you can actually send them your InfoPath template. They will take a look at it, and they will help you find a workaround if you're having trouble getting that to behave correctly. Okay, so we've got a date field here. I'm just going to click apply again. And the next thing I want to add down here, let me remember what I wanted to add. Yes, I wanted to add a drop-down control. So I'm going to drag this over, this drop-down control underneath the date. And I'm going to click on that control that I just added to bring up the properties. I'm going to rename this department. And because I don't want people typing in their own departments, that's why I made this a drop-down. Oops, I have to click apply. Yeah, I always have to remember to click apply. Okay, and then I'm going to rename this drop-down real quickly. You've all seen this step before. Department. And now I want this department to be pre-populated with some choices so that the user can't just enter whatever they want. In order to do that, I'm going to have to pull those choices from somewhere. So I'm going to go to the data pane over here, and I am going to click on the query tab, because basically I want department to query my particular data source. Now, there are no queries right now, of course, because this is new. I'm going to click on the data source button to bring this up. And you will see that there are many different ways you can add data. I listed some of these on the first slide of my PowerPoint presentation. We're going to go the easy route that doesn't require connecting to another service. And we're just going to upload an Excel file that I have already prepared with a list of department names. I am going to click upload, and fingers crossed, there we go, the department spreadsheet that I already have prepared. And it's going to automatically call this departments. That's going to be the name of the data connection. And here we have this checkbox on load. Again, this is the same functionality that you would see in InfoPath Designer. And we do want this to load. We do want the data to populate on load. So I'm going to leave that checked. And I'm going to click done. Oops, I'm going to click done for real this time. And here we go. Our data connection has been created. So now I need to connect that to this department control that I have created. So I'm going to click that again. And over here, down here underneath items in this properties pane, I am going to click this drop down and select data source. And now I'm going to click edit data source so that I can tell it, even though there's only one data source in the form, this brings up the add items from data source menu. I'm going to click departments. And then under value and display name, these are the names of columns in the spreadsheet. So I formatted the spreadsheet specifically to have these columns so that I would know what I'm choosing when I get into here. So I'm going to click the value column from the spreadsheet to be the value, and the display name that will actually be shown to the user, I'm going to click the display column. And down here you have the ability to filter the data as well. We're not going to go into that detail today. Just so you know, that ability is there too, just as you would have in InfoPath Designer. And I'm going to click Save. All right, so I've set up my first 3 controls in this form, and I'm going to click Save and Publish. And while that is saving my progress, I'm going to pop open the question pane one more time. Oh, and Matt just said thanks. Okay, thanks a lot, Matt. All right, so an expense report is not very good without any actual expenses, and usually you have more than one expense. So that means that this would be a good application for a repeating section, right? So we are going to add a repeating section next. And to do that, we're going to collapse this basic control section here. Those are collapsible. And we're going to go down to advanced. So I'm going to expand that. And underneath Advanced, you'll see a whole bunch of these Formotus specific controls that I mentioned before: camera, signature, location, etc. And down here at the bottom, you see a repeating section. So I'm going to drag a repeating section onto my form down here at the bottom. And this is what a repeating section looks like on Formotus. So I've just clicked on my repeating section, and the first thing, of course, what I want to do first is label this repeating section so I know what it is. I'm going to label it expenses, and you do have the ability to create a multi-column layout. This is sort of like adding a table to your repeating section in InfoPath, where you have a separate column for each one of the repeating fields. Here it's a little bit more restricted. You can have 1, 2, or 3 columns, and that's just because on a mobile device you really don't want to see a 10-column repeating section or a repeating table that wide. Then you've got to, scroll back and forth to see the entire thing, or zoom out to where everything is 2-point font and it's illegible. So you can either do 1, 2, or 3 column repeating section tables here. We're going to leave this on 1 column just for simplicity. And I want this word expenses to stand out a little bit. So under label style, I'm going to make this bold weight. All right, and let's click apply so that we can actually see what that looks like over here in our view pane. And here we go. So we have an expenses section. And down here, right now we just have a repeating section. This is an empty repeating section. It does nothing except repeat. So in order to actually add some usable controls, we need to click here to add controls. So I am going to actually do that and click where it says to click. And that is going to bring up a pop-up menu with repeating section controls. And these are basically the same controls that you saw over here on the left earlier, except these controls will be repeating when you add them. So I'm going to add a couple of repeating controls. I'm going to add a text box first. So simply click on the word text box. No need to drag this time around. And here we go. We have a nice repeating text box inserted into our repeating section. I'm going to do exactly what you think I'm going to do. I'm going to rename this, and let me see if I can remember. I'm going to label this one description and click apply. Oh, and I'm going to do something that I haven't done in a couple of steps. I'm going to click the fields pane, and I'm going to rename some of these so that they aren't meaningless later on. So let me first click on the repeating section, and let me edit that. Now you'll notice over here another Formotus Creator limitation. Let me rename this real quickly. Expenses. So you'll notice that there's no visual distinction in Formotus Creator between a non-repeating field like the top 3 here and even in a repeating field like the expenses. Or actually, expenses is a repeating group. Text box 1, which will be shortly renamed, is the actual repeating field. So that's just something to keep in mind. I know InfoPath Designer has a nice little icon logo that lets you know when something's repeating. This is going to be description. Okay, all right. So I've updated my fields. By now you're probably getting the hang of this. Rename the field, rename the label. I'm going to add another repeating field. Oops. There we go. Click here to add controls. This should bring that pop-up. I'm going to add another text box field for the cost. That's another important piece of information that you would want in an expense report. Click on the control to bring up the properties, rename it so that you know what it is, and then go over to the fields pane, rename that so that you know what it is. I promise we're going to do something a little more interesting here after I add the next control. All right, and okay, now we get to add a cool control because what's the point of having a mobile form if you can't use some of the unique features of a mobile device, right? So I am going to add a camera control because wouldn't it be cool if you could just take a picture of the receipt for this particular expense and attach it to the form, right? So under Advanced, I'm going to click the camera control. I think I clicked the camera control. There we go. And down here, we have added a Formotus specific control that will allow you, if you click the little camera icon down here, not right now because we're designing it, but if you were actually on a mobile device, which I will show at the end of this webinar, I have a simulator on my computer, and that will allow you to take a picture of your receipt, or in the case of this particular demo, a picture of my palm because I don't have any receipts to show you. But you get the picture. No pun intended. Actually, that pun was very much intended. I apologize. All right, we're going to rename this receipt, and over here, we are going to change the default camera 1 name to receipt. And again, that's just a best practice so that you can glance at your fields and immediately see which of the controls that they are connected to without having to actually click on the control and wait for it to, or sorry, without having to click on the field and wait for it to highlight the control that it's bound to. Okay, we are almost done with this form. Now, wouldn't it be nice if we had a field down at the bottom that would automatically tally all of the costs that we had entered in our expense report? That would be cool, wouldn't it? It turns out we can do that. And we're going to do that by adding a special text box. Let me get out of this. Okay, we're back in the main controls pane. We are going to go back up to the basic controls because we are done with our repeating section. And we are going to add a special text box down here at the very bottom. And we're going to put a formula in that text box that will automatically calculate the total cost of the entire expense report. Let me quickly rename this. Total cost. Oops, click apply. And over here, and you'll see this isn't, you can tell this isn't part of the repeating section because it's not underneath that expenses repeating group that has that little expandable arrow there. Total cost. Okay, and we are going to assign a formula to this total cost. And I apologize for simply springing this formula on you out of the blue because this is just a very quick webinar. If you want to know more about building formulas using the formula builder, inserting functions, inserting fields from your formula, feel free to sign up for our class in March. But just trust me when I say that this formula will sum all of the cost fields in that expense repeating group and display the total cost in this field that I've just added. Okay, so that is total cost. Now there's only one drawback. This is a text box, so by default it is editable, and we don't want the user to be able to overwrite the actual calculated value, that calculated sum of all the costs. So what we are going to do is in this total cost text box, we are going to click on logic. We haven't used this yet. We've just been playing with the properties of the controls. We're going to click on logic so we can add a rule to this particular text box. I'm going to click New Rule. And this is going to bring up the rules pane. This should look somewhat familiar to you if you've used InfoPath Designer before. Let's call this rule disable if not blank. So basically, once we've started entering costs, that total cost field is no longer going to be blank. And we want to disable it once that happens. So the condition is going to be total cost is not blank. So if it's not blank, if it's already started tallying those individual repeating costs, we want to disable this control. So it's still going to be on the form, it's still going to show a number, but it's going to be disabled, which means the user will not be able to overwrite the automated sum that is the default calculation on this field. All right. So we've set up our total cost. This is great. We now have basically our entire expense report. The only thing is we have nowhere to submit it. So the last thing we're going to do is go to the data pane. And this time we're going to click on the Submit tab, and we are going to add a couple of submit connections. So we are going to submit to SharePoint, first of all. That's something that many of you are used to, and so you probably want to know how to do that with Formotus Creator as well. You saw me just click on that data destination button over here. That brings up the data menu, and right now we're going to select SharePoint Library. Click Next, and we can name this connection. Just going to give it a basic name, Submit to SharePoint Library. And here you have to give it your SharePoint site. I have that already prepared here. We have a training site set up for Formotus that I'm going to use for this webinar. Oops. Let's bring that menu back up where I can see it. All right. And I'm going to actually have to enter my credentials here. And click Connect so that it can connect to this particular site. And then once I've done that, I am going to select the library that I want. So this is going to give you a pop-up list of all of the available libraries on that site. I'm going to click Webinar Demo. That's the one I want. Ignore that pop-up over there. And a recommended practice from Formotus is to attach your credentials to the form. If you don't do that, then anyone who submits the form is going to have to enter their own credentials into a pop-up on their actual mobile device. That can get a little cumbersome on a phone. Every time you submit a form, you have to enter your credentials over and over again. So what you can do is attach credentials, and they don't have to be your own personal ones. You can have your IT support create a special set of credentials that are just for submitting to that particular library if you want. And over here, Formotus will just default name this form whatever you have called your form template when you were designing it, submit it at, and it'll insert the now function. I'm going to change that a bit because I don't like that. I want to actually put my name or the name of the person who submitted the report as well. So I'm going to overwrite this default with, again, an expression that I've already created to save time. And I do want to overwrite if the file exists, just in case the person happens to submit the exact same expense report more than once. And you also have the ability to promote fields just like you would in InfoPath. So I clicked that Promote Fields button, and I'm just going to promote the full name. Let's promote the date, the department, and the total cost. And you see you also have the ability to promote the repeating fields. However, you cannot promote that receipt field. That was the camera control that takes the image of the receipt. You cannot promote that camera control field, but you can promote the basic controls like the text box and if you throw a radio button or a checkbox or anything like that, you can promote those as well. Okay, I'm going to click Done, and I have now configured my data connection to submit to a SharePoint library. All right, and we'll click Done again to finalize that. And we have a Submit to SharePoint Library data connection over here. Success. But wait, there's more. We are also going to submit a PDF of this form to an email destination. So I'm going to click Data Destination once more. And this time I'm going to select the email option and click Next. This is a really handy dandy feature. because it will automatically create a PDF version of your actual form and attach it to an email that you can then send. Okay, and you can select, you can hard code an email address in here, or for example, if you had a field on the form where somebody typed in their email address, you could just put that field name in here, and then it would send it to whatever email address you had entered in that field. We're not going to get that complicated. Again, this is just an intro webinar. You can do the same thing. You've got a CC field, you've got a BCC field. You can customize the subject. You can customize the message of the body here. Let me just do that real quickly. Let me say, this expense report was submitted from a Formotus mobile app. So you've got a lot of stuff you can do here. You can also adjust the attachment name. I'm going to do that. I'm going to name it the exact same thing that's in the library, so that the form in the library and the PDF will have the exact same name. That's just a best practice thing. You don't want multiple names running around in your system. Okay, and then I'm going to click Done. Oops. I'm actually going to edit that because I don't have access. Oops, I'm going to edit that because I don't have access to the training@qdabra.com email account. I only have access to my own. Okay, so now we'll be sending all of these to myself so that you can actually see what they look like. Okay, so we have added our submit connections. The very last thing we need to do now is actually throw a button on the form that will allow us to activate those submit connections. So over here on the control pane, you will see we have a buttons section. So I'm going to expand the buttons, and you'll see they have a default submit button. That only works if you're only submitting to one source. We want to submit to two sources, so we want to do both the SharePoint library submit and the email submit. So I'm going to drag this custom button down here at the very bottom underneath total cost. And I'm going to click on the button, and I think you know what I'm going to do first. I am going to rename that button to submit to SharePoint and email. And then the next thing I'm going to do I'm going to really quickly click Save and Publish, just in case my browser decides to do something weird and throw an error, which does happen. So I suggest that you save and publish frequently and often. All right, so now over here on Logic. So we're still in the button properties. We've clicked on the Logic tab. We are going to add a rule, and this is probably familiar to anyone who's used InfoPath Designer. You can add multiple rules to a button. I'm not going to add any conditions. I'm just going to say, call this rule submit. We want this to run every time we click the button, no conditions. Our action is going to be submit data. From, we're going to select the SharePoint library submit connection. That is great. And let me do the submit to SharePoint. Okay, so we have created a rule to submit to SharePoint, and you will see this rule pop up over here on the left. There we go. We're also going to add a second rule to submit to the email connection. Submit to email, again, no conditions. We want this to always run when we click the button. We're going to select the submit data action again and click I forgot to rename this email submit, so this just has the default email submit name. That's fine, we know what it is. and I'm going to click Save. Now notice you can only do one action per rule. This is different from InfoPath Designer where you can add a whole bunch of actions per rule. You can, however, add multiple conditions for a rule. You just can't add multiple actions. So that's why I have to have separate rules for each one of these submits. And you will see this pop up over here. And the last thing I want to do, and I believe I can do this, is close the form when we're done because we don't need to do anything else. And I believe there is a, oops, okay, no, there is no close form action. Okay, yes, that's right. What you could do to keep someone from, repeatedly clicking the submit button when they're done with it, you could switch to a new view, and that view could say, thank you for submitting your form. You may close this. That's something that I used before as well in InfoPath. So we'll go ahead and do that. All right. So we have completed our expense report. I'm going to click Save and Publish one last time. And then we are going to try out our form. Now, one thing I want to point out before we do that is that this is all on a single view. And actually in Formotus Creator, views are called pages. So if you have used InfoPath Designer a lot, you know that you can add multiple views and switch between views. You can do that here as well. You can add multiple pages and switch between pages. If I wanted to add another page, which I won't do here, I would click this plus button. That would add another page. So you'd see page 1, you'd also see page 2 here. And then you could click on those different pages and you could design a different layout for each page. The last thing I want to point out before I try out the sample form is this PDF page here. This is a special PDF view that will be the exact view of any PDF attachment that you create. And you do have the ability to customize this. I have not done anything to this PDF view, which means that it's going to look exactly like the page that I have designed over here. And again, this is just a simple webinar. We won't go into customizing the PDF, but that's also another nice, neat feature. If you were doing this in InfoPath Designer, and if you had our DBXL product that will generate a PDF from that, you would have to design a special view and then select that view in DBXL to generate the PDF. That's all done built into Formotus Creator. So that's a nice, huge advantage that you have over using InfoPath Designer. You can also save as a PDF in InfoPath Designer, but the nice thing about Formotus Creator is not only do you get that auto-generated PDF view, but you also have the built-in ability to email that PDF as an attachment. Okay, enough talking. I'm going to save and publish this one more time because you can never click save and publish enough as a best practice. And now I am going to switch over to a desktop version of the Formotus Pro app. And this is basically the desktop version for Windows of the app that runs on your mobile devices. And this will load up here in a minute. It's a little slow on desktop. It's much faster if you have a mobile phone or a tablet that you would be using this on. So this should load up here in a minute. I apologize, it's taking a little longer than expected. I hope it does load here today. I really do want to show you this form. If not, I do have the ability to fill it out on my mobile device and at least email the PDF to you. Okay, in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and download and install this form on my mobile device and go ahead and fill it out just in case this ends up not loading. And I'm filling this out. I am very happy to report, even though you cannot see it, hopefully this will load soon. It did load for me last night. I'm happy to report the form is working as expected on my phone, which you cannot see. Again, apologies for that. I'm going to keep filling it out on my phone, so at least I'll be able to show you the PDF when we are done. Okay. Whew. Oh gosh. Okay. I'm going to give it another minute, and then I am going to restart this this app, and hopefully it will boot up. Okay, this is this is not working here. Let me see if I can close that, and let me try to open it up again. Okay, let me try to open that up again from scratch, and hopefully this will work this time. Fingers crossed that it will actually boot up this time around. And no, I apologize, guys. It looks like this is not working here. I am going to... It is working on my phone as I speak. I'll give it one more try. And it is working on my phone. I just sent off the email. I was hoping to show this form in action. I'll see if I can get it up and running on a trial account later. All right, fingers crossed that this is going to load this time around. I'll give it another 30 seconds, and then we will give up on it, and I will simply show you the PDF version of the form, which at least will allow you to see the layout, if not the actual form in action. Okay, yeah, I think I'm going to have to give up on this. I apologize for not being able to demo the actual form here for you. However, I did just fill it out on my email account, on my phone. And if I refresh this, here we go. So here we go. We have an expense report submitted. So this is the email that was automatically generated when I filled out the form on my phone as I was waiting for the Formotus app to load on my computer. You'll see here is the, remember I submitted that special formula for the title, as well as customized the text that would appear in the email. And if I click on this expense report, that was the PDF attachment that I just clicked on. And you will see here in a few seconds the PDF version of a form that I filled out. And this will at least give you an idea of the layout of the form. And oh goodness, okay, it is blank. I am batting. Oh, has it finished loading yet? And it has not. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. Let me very quickly find one that I created last night so you can at least see what this looks like. I believe I I had one that I downloaded yesterday, I believe. Let me find that one. I will show you an example if it kills me. I know I did have one that I downloaded recently. Let's see, it's not there. Let me see if I still have the email, which I'm hoping I did not delete. And I believe I might have deleted it. All right, hold on. I will give you an actual PDF to look at. Let me fill out my old webinar demo. Let me fill this out real quickly and I will submit that. In the meantime, let me switch back to the slides. And obviously there will be a post-webinar survey today. And there are a couple of links here. For the Formotus Creator overview. And that's an overview of what the Form Creator does. If you would like to read a little bit more about what Formotus, how Formotus describes their various features. And sorry, I am filling this form out on my phone as we speak. That's why I'm having a little trouble both talking and typing at the same time. And the second link down there is Formotus support. And again, as I think I mentioned earlier on the call, Formotus support, that's where you could go if you have any issues with creating forms in Formotus Creator. Or if you have forms that you've created in InfoPath Designer as well, you can email them, usually 24 to 48 hour response time. And they will, very often you can send them the actual template and they will send it back with modifications as well as an explanation of what those modifications are in order to get your form up and running. Okay, I am submitting my old demo on my phone. I apologize again for the failure of my demos on this webinar today. And that should submit here very shortly, and then I will be able to show you what a PDF of one of these forms looks like, and that will also give you an idea of what the layout would look like on your form. All right, so in preparation for that, let me switch over to my email. It should be appearing here shortly. And if you have any questions or comments, it'd be a great time to type them in. I'd be more than happy to answer them. There we go. Okay, that email is getting sent off as we speak, and I should shortly receive another email up here. There we go. Okay, this is my old demo, and this should have a PDF version of the form. There we go. So this is my old demo. As you can see, here's the header section. I made it a slightly different color. Here's the name field, the date field that was auto set, department. I chose engineering from the drop-down. Here's my first expense from the repeating section, the description, the cost value, and the receipt, which, as you can see, is just a picture of my computer keyboard. Obviously, that would be a real receipt if this were a real expense report. Here is the second expense in that repeating section, the description, the cost, $350 this time, and another picture of my keyboard in lieu of a receipt. And down here, you'll see that total cost field. The calculation is working. It summed 500 and 350 to 850 correctly. And that is the end of the PDF. So this is essentially the same layout of the form as you would see it on your mobile device. Obviously, it's a little wider here on a laptop screen. And then if I switch over to my library, remember we didn't just submit this via email, we also submitted to a library. And over here, you will see, here we go. 8 minutes ago, this was the submit of the form from the demo that I actually built on the webinar, and this one that down here is a minute ago is my old demo, the one that I submitted so that I could get you an actual working PDF to view. So both of the submit connections work, both to the email and to the library. All right, that brings us to the close of a rather long webinar. I apologize for the length of this, but as you can see, Formotus Creator is a pretty powerful browser-based mobile form designer. And I think with a few more features and a little more development, it could grow into a nice, robust competitor to InfoPath Designer. All right, for the 5 attendees remaining, thank you very much for today's webinar. And at the end of the webinar, there will be a survey to fill out. And if you fill out that survey, you'll receive today's slides as well as the template that I've designed and all of the additional materials that I used as well. Thank you very much for attending, and hopefully we will see you next week. Thank you, Alan. Well done under tough conditions. I appreciate that. All right. Take care, everyone, and have a wonderful day.